Well, let's start with that. How long did it take to edit?
A little bit. A few weeks. Yeah, it was like 3 years.
Yeah,
Right.
that's all.
Usually you
3
say,
years.
oh, 6 months? You had 6 months? That's incredible long time. 3 years.
Yeah.
So you had a book.
I had it. Well, so the arc of this is why it's taken so. So I went to Auschwitz in 2012 in honor of Rena Kornreich-Gellison. And while I was there, I discovered that there was another survivor from the first transport, and that was Edith. And she was in her 90s, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I had no idea there was other survivors. And Edith had a very different story because she had traveled with all of her girls that she grew up with. And she was willing to talk. She had an incredible memory. And and I said to her, I don't want to do another memoir. I want to do a multiple narrative. And she said, oh, we were all there. You should do that. That's what you should do. And so I filmed everything, thinking, oh, it would be so easy to make a documentary. And then I realized I had to raise money to do that. And then I really didn't know what I was doing. So I just kept filming everything. Poor Bea. And
You happened to have a camera, so you said, I'm going to record it?
I rented cameras every time I went to Slovakia and Auschwitz, yeah. And I did a couple trips with Stephen Hopkins, who's one of our DPs, and actually my boyfriend at the time, Simon Worrell, and we just filmed and filmed. And at some point, it became clear that I needed to do a book. And so I took 2 years off. I wrote the book. I sold the book. Books are actually easier to do than documentary films. I just want to say that. I know that if you're a writer in the audience, you're like, oh, you got to be kidding. It's because you just sit on your desk and you write, and you describe everything. The problem with film is you need visual. You have to do visual archive.
Really?
It's really hard.
Well, let's get to the visuals in a minute.
But I'll go back. So the book came out, and then we went back to the film. And that's when I found her in 2020. And I said, I need help. And she's a glutton for punishment.
The filmmaking and the art should be the easy part, but of course, that's like the dessert, because the fundraising is always the hard part.
Hard part.
Now, most of us try to there's a rule in documentary filmmaking, you don't do the film until you've raised the money, which most of us break. And you broke you did a Kickstarter in 2012, I saw up there.
Yeah.
And did you tell me that you did a fundraiser? No. Every time you decided to go do a shoot, you did a fundraiser.
Pretty much.
I've never heard of this before.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, first of all, I broke all the rules in documentary filmmaking, and it was. I mean, what happened was I would find out about a survivor. Somebody would contact me and say, why didn't you interview my mother? And she's in Sydney, Australia, Elizabeth Bentz. And we couldn't get the money to fly to Sydney, Australia, and it was COVID. But we did find somebody who could go film her. And so we did a Zoom, and we fundraised to pay the cinematographer in Australia. So, but people just kept arriving. And I will say, the credits, the end credits, it was 3-4 months on the credits. The credits are like another movie. And literally in September, I got 3 new photographs, and one of them is Anna Stern with the 1002 holding her great-grandson. And I was like, I gotta put that in.
You went by very quickly. People say you did a Zoom. We're all used to doing Zooms. But the Zoom wasn't what you filmed. The Zoom was what you directed.
Yeah.
So that's something very different. You have a camera person. They go with a camera. Maybe the Zoom looks, no, go a little over there. Wait, there's a window in the background. No, I don't like that. Wait, okay, now let's film. it's a very different process, but for a lot of people during COVID, that was the way to do it, and it
especially with
beautiful.
90-year-olds. I mean, the bottom line is, if somebody in their 90s contacts you and says, I want to do an interview, you better get
Jump.
the interview. And I will say that Bertha Berkowitz's sister, Fanny, when she tells that little story, that's her pre-interview with her daughter.
Which story?
So about finding her sister at Bergen-Belsen. Bertha, your sister's here, your sister's here. That was done on an iPhone. Bea and I were going to record it, and COVID happened. We're going to film her. So we couldn't for another year. And her daughter got her on camera on iPhone as a pre-interview, and we were going to come 4 days later to interview her, and she died 5 hours later. So the only way we have that footage is because her daughter got her on the iPhone telling this amazing story of finding her sister. You know, it's just like every bit of this footage was, you know, just sort of luck of the draw. Getting, and you know, Edith, when she said that she got her period after 3 years in Auschwitz, that was the last time I saw her, and she just very glibly says that, and I went, I've known you for 3 years, and you've never told me that, and I didn't have a camera to get it. So it was like, how do we get that in there? The book was already out. It was such an important, you know, such an important moment, especially for women, right?
Let's talk about archives. You have so much material. How did you find it all? This is not an easy thing. It's easier now that we have Facebook and archival houses, and you can literally look online and see the things you want. But still, Heather, Bea.
The visuals, like that's what you were mentioned before, was like one of the challenges, right? Because we didn't have visuals for those stories because we didn't have anything.
Blank spaces in there for a while.
So it was like reenactments, illustrations. We were recreating that, and some amazing archival from like Holocaust Museum, mostly. Those I remember one of the key moments is when you found family footage with all those films from families, because that was so special and unique. And then we happen, I love that footage, like Bertha's, when she's walking with the lager showing around. That was like an accident almost, right? Like
Imperial War Museum. Bertha was very photogenic, and there was a lot of photographs of her after the liberation of Bergen-Belsen. And a lot of them were posed, you know, like she's lying there and there's somebody with their arm up to show how skinny they are. And the caption says, you know, women with typhus. She didn't have typhus, but they were, you know, so a lot, and actually liberation photos, a lot of them are posed. I made a real commitment not to use the posed photos. So the photos that you see are true, at least as much as I know, or I can tell you that they were posed. So we, for a long time, we just had blank spaces, and then I would go, you know, digging into the archives, contact my archivist. One of the biggest moments we had is Russian footage, and it's with the blowing up the crematoriums. And it's a few seconds in a documentary film that was of Russia, the Russians liberating Auschwitz. And that footage was taken by somebody in Auschwitz, and it is prisoners clearing away the rubble of the crematorium after it's been blown up, and it is just seconds. And I kept losing it because it's in this huge documentary, and if you blink, you miss it. And Michael Berenbaum, who's a Holocaust historian and one of our advisors, a wonderful person, when he was watching the film, he was like, "Where'd you get that?" Like he had never seen it before. So it just, you know, it really, I mean, it was tireless. It was, you know, I can't tell you how much work. And then every time I find something, I go, "Bea, we get to put this in," and she'd be like, her eyes are bleeding.
It was like 3 years of edit. Pretty much.
Let's tell us about the footage of the prisoners. Some was obviously redone for later. How much was there of the real thing? It all worked. It didn't matter. You know, we were there in it, even though we know maybe it was done 50 years later.
Of the prisoners in Auschwitz, there's
Yeah.
nothing. Of women, nothing. There is
So it's all
absolutely, from
done
that
after.
period, 1942, there is absolutely no archive. In fact, the only photo we have of women's dead bodies is the one we use when Bertha is talking about the Lycan Commando. That's it. And so we use Ostadia Top, The Last Stage, which was shot in 1947, came out in 1948, and it's almost considered a documentary, even though it's a docudrama, because she shot in Auschwitz before anybody, right after the Russians left. Everybody in the film, except for the actors with speaking roles, are prisoners, former prisoners. They're Polish, obviously, because the Jews are all dead. They're wearing their uniforms. And you're seeing that work scene, you're seeing what they were forced to do. And I listened to testimonies, I read about it, I could never figure out what they actually had to do until I saw that film. And I was like, oh my, this is what they're describing. It was insane, these poles pushing and, so we had to make a creative choice whether or not it was are we walking too fine a line to use this footage? But we didn't have another way to tell this visual archive. And I love what Bea did with it. So talk about that, because I thought what you did with it is great.
Yeah, let's talk about editing. Films are made in the editing room. You can make a film terrible, you can make a good film great. It's all in the editing room. You edited forever, and when you started editing, how much material did you have? And as you went, you just, okay, now where am I going to put this? Tell us about the process.
Yeah, it was pretty overwhelming. It was a lot, but especially at the end of the day, it was overwhelming. Just the materials, the actual story, the whole story, and Heather's historian, it's I want to be respectful, of her knowledge, all that is there, and at the same time, obviously add my input and my creative, all ideas that could just help the movie. So there were challenges in terms of, because I have so much material, different material, right? We have archive, we have illustrations, we have movies. So it was an idea of differentiated those in a way that visually you can kind of almost identify, okay, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that in a way. And also embracing, as you were saying, embracing those differences. For instance, we have a lot of the interviews, the Shoah interviews from the 90s. Most of them.
VHS.
VHS, 4:3 format. And then we have 16:9, which is the new interviews that we shot. So it's basically using that as a way to tell the story, because it's the scope of the project. It's all these different decades, so much time. And telling the story in that way. So it was challenging, but I think it was fun in a way, exciting in a way of let's utilize that to actually tell the story and just surface story.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody has a question or two. We have microphones, so I'll call on you and then wait for the microphone.
And while we're doing that, I'll just mention that. So this is my
person over here.
This is my Bible. This is the Auschwitz Chronicle. It's the day-to-day workings of the SS in Auschwitz, and that moment where they say 2,000 women are listed as dying and 10,000 actually died. That's in here, the 2,000. Every single person I ever interviewed and didn't interview, Rudy Verba, who escaped from Auschwitz, that every prisoner testimony says 10,000 girls died on that day. The SS records say 2,000, so they lied.
Yes, hello.
Hi. I didn't hear a word of anger or rage at those monsters from these people. Did you not choose it? Did you edit it out? Or was there none?
Oh, there's definitely anger. We're trying to tell a story, and so the narrative is what we're focusing on. And I will say that in the Show It Foundation tapes, there's bits at the end, you know, where people can say things, but they're never raging. They're always trying to say something for the future generations. You know, they totally hold the Nazis accountable. There is that accountability, but we're talking decades later that they're talking about it, and so it may possibly.
I feel it now.
Yeah,
And
but
they actually experienced it live. Of course, I did too. I'm that old though,
yeah.
so I experienced it. But it's amazing to me that that's what's wrong with us,
Yeah.
people. We don't get angry at people.
Yeah,
We don't pick up a gun and go out looking for them.
yeah,
Maybe we should.
Do we have someone over here?
yeah.
Yes, wait for the
Faye.
mic. Coming to you.
Faye, tell us who you are, please. And Faye, I will just say, gave us one of the most important archives that we use. It's a book that her parents brought from Slovakia. It's the Death Field of Women, and that was a real challenge to use whether or not we should use it, but it's the only thing we could find. The date's wrong on it. I just was like, oh my God, we got to change the date. Anyway, it's a typo. Fortunately, we haven't done our DCP yet. But anyway, it's an amazing book, and that added a huge amount to our archive. Sorry.
Hi. Well, there are so many things that I want to say. Oh, sorry. So my mother was on the 4th transport. So there were, I think, a total of 7 transports from Slovakia. I think the film is amazing, an amazing amount of credit. I mean, everything, Heather, I don't even know what to say about Heather. Heather is beyond amazing. She's the voice of all of those women who were on those 7 transports from Slovakia, all in like March and maybe the beginning of April 1942. And I don't know how many people know, but Heather learned Slovak. And she can, I think, is that a, oh, you knew? I thought you knew. You learned a little bit. Heather, I guess through osmosis, because of all of her work with it, that she got some Slovak out of it. I don't know. I just think Heather is amazing. She's the voice. She's the voice of all of those women. And the only thing that I wanted to mention is that very big selection in December happened to have been Shabbos Hanukkah, which was a very important Saturday. Happens to be this weekend, which is why I am in New York, because my parents or my mother wouldn't let us leave on Shabbos Hanukkah, because that's when she had to jump over the ditch and was separated from her sister in Auschwitz. My children know, and I'm in town and happy to be here, grateful to Heather. And that's a very important day, that December date in 1942 in Auschwitz.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone on this side? There we go.
Please tell us about the illustrations. They're so
Yes.
strong and moving.
Thanks to Jane Schoenberger, one of our producers, is Sophia worked at Disney with Jane and is a portrait artist. And it was, you know, we were sort of struggling what to do, and we had come up with this intro with the photograph, and then we go to so you could see the young woman and the older woman speaking. And so we came up with this idea. I was sort of like, well, what if Sophia took their faces, did the portrait, and then took their hair off? I wanted to know what they looked like. And it was like, ah. And then I was like, can we put Russian, I drove Sophia crazy. Can we put Russian uniforms on? And so then she did that. And can we put it in front of Block 10, which is where they were? And then what I think last summer I was like, can we put striped uniforms on them now? And it's because we want you to understand that the striped uniforms came later, you know, and everybody sees the striped uniforms as part of archive, but these girls were actually, I mean, I will say Sophia made them look more fitting than they actually were. I kept going, no, they were huge. But yeah, she's a fantastic artist, and there's a couple of pieces that we ended up pulling for time. that aren't in the film that she did, which are really, really, really powerful as well. Did you have anything to say about Sophia?
No, I was like, yeah, it was like, again, like that struggle, like finding, but I thought that solution was like so powerful and just kind of like puts you there, just like seeing the girls and that, yeah, it's really strong.
Yeah.
Are we almost done? Good.
Heather, you're amazing. I'm so proud of you. It's beyond.
Thanks,
because
Joyce.
I've seen your process, and I never knew what a genius you are, and the editor as well. But what I want to ask is, what made you become so interested in this subject? Like, it's such a difficult subject. You've spent so much of your life dedicated to telling the stories. How did you become interested in this?
You know, it's not just the Holocaust story, it's the story of these girls. And I met Rena, the thing about these women, when I meet them, and I don't know why, but they connect to me. And they tell me their story in a way that they haven't told other people. I'm a good listener, but I think I connect to the girl in them. And they're still teenagers inside. Doesn't matter if they look like they're 90, they're really teenagers. And that is the core of my relationship with them. And that's what drew me in, because for me, this is a story of girls' rights and girls in history who have been completely ignored by history. I mean, I've had arguments with top historians about this transport. They have been less than a footnote in history books. Holocaust encyclopedias, first transport to Auschwitz timeline. No mention that were 999 girls. And getting them noticed. Thank you, Hamptons Doc Fest. Getting them written into history. And I will say, I mean, every single one of them I've asked, what's it mean to you to be part of this history? Do you understand that you are important to history? And none of them get it. Because they've been ignored for so many decades. And so it's a real privilege to be able to put them in history so that they can be honored and can be remembered. And we are now down to just 4. Regina died 2 weeks ago. And so, yeah, we're very, very lucky to have them.
Tell us what the future of the film is, where everybody here is going to tell everybody they've ever known about the film.
Well, we're going to New York Jewish Film Festival in January, but I can't, well, can I say that, Jane? She said, no. All right, didn't say that. I think it's getting announced this week. We're at Miami Jewish Film Festival, and we're just starting. This is our first foray. I'm really glad to see nobody walked out. And I was in a raptured audience. I watched all of you up there, seeing if anybody was snoring, and I didn't see that, so that's good. Oh, just you. Yeah, so this is really, we're just starting out. And we're so grateful to this venue and seeing all of you here. I mean, for me, this is a big circle. I think the first time I came out to the Hamptons, I visited my best friend in Bay Street. I danced here at New Year's Eve, 1982. It was a disco. Then I ended up working as marketing director. I've got the Hamptons Bay Book Club here, my salsa group here, my swimmers are here. We have a beautiful community out here, and it's so supportive, and it's just wonderful to be in Sag Harbor, which I fell in love with in the 80s.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming.